Hello friends, did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. They told me the graveyard shift gets easier after the first winter. 3 years in, I'm still waiting for that to be true. My name's Carson Vula, and I work the night rotation at the Emerson border, crossing about an hour south of Winnipeg. Most nights, it's just me and the hum of the overhead lights, watching empty highways stretch into darkness on both sides of the booth. The Americans have their side lit up like a stadium. We keep ours practical, functional. A single flood light on the Canadian flag, another on the barrier arm, and that's about it. It was a Tuesday in February when it happened. The kind of night where the cold doesn't just bite, it punches straight through your coat and settles in your bones. Temperature was sitting at -32, and the wind was coming hard off the prairie, driving little pellets of snow across the pavement like broken glass. I'd been on shift since midnight, and in 4 hours, I'd processed exactly 3 vehicles. A transport truck hauling auto parts to Minneapolis, a couple from Grand Forks visiting family in Steinbach, and an RV that got lost looking for the casino. The radio was mostly static that night. Renee Morissette, my usual partner, had called in sick with the flu that was going around, so dispatch kept checking in every hour or so to make sure I hadn't frozen solid in the booth. The conversation was always the same. Emerson, you still with us? Still here, all quiet. Stay warm. Doing my best. Around 3:45 in the morning, I saw headlights approaching from the American side. A single vehicle moving slow. That wasn't unusual. People tend to take it easy on icy roads, especially this close to the border where there's always the chance of hitting a deer or getting pulled into secondary. I stood up from my chair, stretched out the stiffness in my lower back, and stepped outside the booth. The cold hit me like a wall. My breath came out in thick clouds, and the hairs inside my nose froze instantly. I pulled my toque down over my ears and waited as the vehicle rolled closer. It was a pickup truck, dark-colored, maybe blue or black, hard to tell under the sodium lights. Ford F-150 looked like it was from the late 90s or early 2000s, primer spots on the fender. The engine was running rough. That distinctive knock you get when a motor's been running hard for too many miles without proper maintenance. As it pulled up to the barrier, I could see the windows were tinted darker than regulation allows, and there was something off about the way it sat there idling. The driver's window stayed up. I walked over, knocked on the glass with my knuckle. Evening, need you to roll down your window, please. Nothing, just the truck sitting there, engine chugging, exhaust rising white and thick into the frozen air. I knocked again, harder this time. Sir, I need you to lower your window. This is the Canadian border. The window came down about 3 in, just enough for me to see a dark shape behind the wheel, but not enough to make out any features. The cab was unlit, and whoever was driving kept their face turned away from me toward the passenger side. Good evening, I said, keeping my tone professional. Can I see your identification, please? You need to open the barrier. The voice was male, flat, no accent I could place, like he was reading from a card. I need to see some ID first, sir. Passport, enhanced driver's license, anything that proves citizenship. You need to open the barrier. I felt the first tickle of unease. People get nervous at border crossings all the time, especially if they're carrying something they shouldn't be. But this felt different. This felt rehearsed. Sir, I can't let you through without proper identification. If you're a Canadian citizen returning home, I need to see documentation. If you're a US citizen, same thing. That's how this works. The shape in the driver's seat didn't move, didn't turn toward me, just sat there with hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead into the darkness beyond the booth. Open the barrier. I'm going to need you to put the vehicle in park and step out, please. That's when I noticed there was no license plate on the front of the truck. That's not unusual for vehicles registered in certain states, but something made me walk around to the back to check. My boots crunched on the frozen gravel. The truck's exhaust was so thick I had to wave my hand through it to see clearly. No plate on the back either, just 2 empty screw holes where one should have been. I came back around to the driver's side. Sir, your vehicle doesn't have a license plate. I'm going to need you to turn off the engine and step out with your identification and vehicle registration. You need to open the barrier. The same words, the exact same tone, like a recording. I put my hand on my radio. Sir, this is your last warning. Turn off the vehicle and step out, or I'm calling for backup and we're going to have a problem. For the first time, the driver moved. Not much, just a slight turn of the head like he was looking at me from the corner of his eye. I still couldn't make out any features. The interior of that cab was dark as a well, and the way the figure sat there, hunched forward slightly, hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, it didn't look quite natural, didn't look quite right. Open the barrier, the voice said again. I stepped back from the truck and keyed my radio. Dispatch, this is Emerson. I've got a situation here, need you to send someone down. The radio crackled. Emerson, what's the nature? Vehicle refusing to provide ID, no plates. Driver won't comply with instructions. 104, sending a unit from customs. ETA 20 minutes, 20 minutes. I looked back at the truck. It just sat there, engine running, exhaust pouring out. That dark shape behind the wheel, not moving, not speaking. I thought about approaching again, thought about being more forceful, but something in my gut told me to keep my distance. Something about the way that truck sat there felt wrong, felt like a trap. So I waited, stood there in the freezing cold, watching, hand never far from my radio. The wind picked up, driving snow across the road in twisting patterns. The overhead lights swayed slightly on their poles, throwing shadows that seemed to move when they shouldn't. And through it all, the truck just idled. After about 5 minutes, the driver spoke again. You need to open the barrier. Same words, same flat delivery, like he was stuck on a loop. Not happening, I called out. You can wait here until my supervisor arrives, or you can turn around and head back to the States. Your choice. The driver didn't respond, didn't move. The truck kept running, kept pouring out that thick white exhaust. I found myself staring at it, watching the way it rose and twisted in the wind. And I started to notice something odd. The exhaust was too thick, too white, like the truck was running on something other than regular gasoline. And there was a smell to it, faint but distinct under the usual burn of engine fumes. Sweet, almost like antifreeze, but not quite. I moved to the booth to get out of the wind. From inside, I had a better view of the barrier and the stretch of road beyond it. Empty, nothing but darkness and snow. I checked the camera feed on the monitor, toggled through the different angles, front approach, side view, rear view, overhead. Everything looked normal except for that truck sitting there at the barrier. Engine running, no plates, driver refusing to comply. I zoomed in on the overhead camera, tried to get a better look at the driver through the windshield. The image was grainy, washed out by the floodlights, but I could make out the general shape of someone sitting behind the wheel, and I could see something else too, something I hadn't noticed from ground level. The driver wasn't alone. There was someone or something in the passenger seat, another dark shape sitting perfectly still, facing forward just like the driver, and in the back seat, maybe 2 more. Hard to tell with the tinted windows and the angle of the camera, but there were definitely other figures in that truck. All of them sitting motionless, all of them facing forward. I grabbed my radio again. Dispatch, update on that unit. Still en route 15 minutes. Copy, be advised there may be multiple occupants in the vehicle. Noted. Do you need additional backup? I looked at the monitor at those dark shapes sitting so still in that idling truck, and I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say, send everyone you've got. But I've been doing this job long enough to know that calling for extra help over what might just be a family of nervous travelers isn't going to win me any favors with the bosses. Negative. 1 unit should be fine. 104. I put the radio down and looked out the window of the booth. The truck was still there, still running, exhaust still pouring out in those thick white clouds. I decided to try one more time. Stepping back out into the cold, I approached the driver's side window. It was still down those 3 in, just enough for sound to pass through. Sir, I can see you have passengers. I'm going to need all of you to exit the vehicle with your identification. If anyone in this vehicle is a minor, I'll need to see documentation for them as well. Silence. Then after a long pause, you need to open the barrier. That's not going to happen. You have 2 choices here. You can comply with my instructions and wait for my supervisor to arrive, or you can turn this vehicle around and head back across the line. Those are your only options. I waited for a response. None came, but I noticed something new. The passenger side window was starting to come down slowly, maybe an inch at a time, like someone was holding the button and letting it creep. I couldn't see who was doing it, couldn't see anything in that dark interior. Whoever's in the passenger seat, I need you to keep your hands visible and provide identification. The window kept lowering, 2 in now, 3, and with each inch I caught a glimpse of something pale moving behind the glass. Not a hand reaching out, something else. Something that looked almost like fingers, but wrong, too long, too many joints. I stepped back from the truck. Stop lowering that window. Stop right now. It kept coming down, 4 in 5. And now I could hear something from inside the cab. Not talking, something else. A sound like breathing, but wet, ragged. Multiple sources all out of sync with each other. That's when my nerve broke. I backed away from the truck, hand on my radio, ready to call this in as an emergency. But before I could key the mic, the passenger window stopped moving. Stopped at about 6 in down, showing nothing but darkness beyond the glass. And all that wet, ragged breathing stopped too. The truck just sat there, quiet, except for the engine, exhaust still rising. I stood there in the cold, heart hammering, trying to figure out what the hell I'd just heard, trying to convince myself it was just the wind, just the way sound carries on frozen air, just my imagination working overtime on a long night shift. But I knew what I'd heard. I knew it wasn't natural. The radio crackled. Emerson, unit is 5 minutes out. Copy, I managed. My voice sounded thin. I stayed outside the booth, kept my distance from the truck, and waited. Watched those dark shapes sitting so still inside. Watched that exhaust rising in thick clouds. Watched the seconds tick by on my watch, each one feeling like an hour. When I finally saw headlights approaching from the Canadian side, the relief was overwhelming. The unit pulled up behind my booth and Callum Beardsley, my night supervisor, got out. He's a big guy, former RCMP, built like he could have played defensive line in the CFL. Seeing him walk toward me in that cold with his flashlight and his no-nonsense expression made me feel like maybe this was going to be okay. Maybe this was just a weird situation that would have a normal explanation. "What have we got?" he asked. I filled him in. "No plates, no ID, driver won't comply. Multiple occupants, weird sounds." I didn't mention the 2 long fingers I thought I saw. Didn't mention how wrong everything felt. Just stuck to the facts. Callum looked at the truck, then at me. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just cold," I said. He nodded and walked toward the driver's side, flashlight up. "Attention, occupants of the vehicle," he called out, voice carrying authority that mine had lacked. "This is Canadian Border Services. I need everyone to exit the vehicle immediately with hands visible and identification ready." The driver's window came down another inch. "You need to open the barrier." Callum looked back at me with an expression that said he understood why I'd called for backup. He turned back to the truck, shined his flashlight directly through the windshield, trying to illuminate the interior. Not happening. Everyone out of the vehicle now. The truck sat there, engine running. No response. Callum tried the door handle. Locked. He moved around to the passenger side, tried that door, also locked. He walked around the back, checking for the missing plate, confirming what I'd already told him. When he came back around to where I was standing, his expression was different, more serious. "Something's not right here," he said quietly. "I know, the exhaust. You noticed the exhaust? Yeah, too thick. And it smells wrong." He paused. "I'm calling this in. We're getting more units down here." He keyed his radio and requested additional backup, citing a suspicious vehicle with multiple occupants refusing to comply with the border agent instructions. Possible smuggling situation, maybe human trafficking. The dispatcher confirmed and said units were en route. We stood there waiting, both of us watching that truck. And then Callum said something that made my blood run cold. "Maloney, does it seem to you like that exhaust is getting thicker?" I looked. He was right. What had been thick white clouds before was now almost opaque, pouring from the tailpipe in volumes that didn't make sense for an idling engine. It was starting to pool along the ground, spreading out like fog, creeping toward where we stood. "We should move back," I said. We retreated to the booth, watching through the window as that white exhaust continued to pour out, thick and unnatural, filling the space around the truck. The overhead lights caught it in strange ways, making it seem almost luminous, almost alive. "Have you ever seen anything like this?" I asked. Callum shook his head. 22 years in law enforcement, never. The exhaust kept coming, kept spreading. It reached the barrier arm and started to creep past it, flowing onto Canadian soil like water finding its level. And sitting in the middle of it all, barely visible now through the white haze, was that truck still running, still occupied, those dark shapes still sitting perfectly motionless inside. "Where's our backup?" Callum muttered, checking his watch. As if in answer, we saw lights approaching from the south. 2 RCMP cruisers moving fast. They pulled up on our side of the barrier and 4 officers got out, all of them stopping short when they saw the wall of white exhaust billowing around the truck. The senior officer, a sergeant I recognized but whose name I couldn't remember, approached the booth. "What's the situation?" Callum explained. The sergeant listened, then looked out at the truck, at the exhaust, at the dark shapes visible through the windshield. His expression went from professional concern to something else. Something like the feeling I'd had earlier, the feeling that this wasn't right, that this was something other. "Have they said anything other than asking you to open the barrier?" "Not a word," I said. The sergeant thought for a moment, then made a decision. "We're evacuating this position, everyone back to the office. We'll handle this from there." "What about the truck?" Callum asked. "It's not going anywhere, look at it." He was right. The exhaust was so thick now you could barely see the vehicle. It sat there like an island in a white sea. Engines still running, occupants still motionless. We retreated to the main office building about 100 yards back from the booth. From there, we watched through binoculars as that exhaust continued to pour out, continued to spread. It didn't dissipate the way normal exhaust should. It just kept accumulating, kept growing until it had covered the entire crossing area and was starting to creep toward the fields on either side. The sergeant was on his radio calling for some kind of hazmat team, trying to explain a situation that didn't make sense. A truck producing impossible amounts of exhaust. Occupants who wouldn't respond. A driver who kept repeating the same phrase over and over. We waited there for 2 hours, watched the sun start to come up, watched the sky turn from black to deep blue to pale gray, and as the light grew, we could see that white exhaust more clearly, could see it wasn't dissipating at all, just sitting there thick as cotton, covering everything. Around 6:00 in the morning, the hazmat team arrived. They suited up, went in with monitors and masks, approached the truck through that wall of white. We watched through binoculars as they reached the vehicle, as they tried the doors, as they finally broke the driver's side window. And then we watched as they stumbled back, one of them tearing off his mask to vomit on the frozen ground. The sergeant's radio crackled. "Sir, you need to see this." We drove down, and one of the cruisers got as close as we dared. The hazmat team leader came over, his face pale even through the faceplate of his suit. "The truck's empty," he said. "What? There's no one inside, no driver, no passengers, just empty seats." I felt my stomach drop. "That's impossible. I saw them. We all saw them. I know what you think you saw, but I'm telling you that truck is empty, has been empty. The seats are covered in frost like no one sat in them for hours, maybe days." Callum pushed past him, walked to the truck, looked inside through the broken window. When he came back, his expression confirmed what the hazmat leader had said. "He's right, no one's in there. But the engine," I said, "it's still running." "No," the hazmat leader said, "it's not. There's no engine in that truck, no battery, no fuel tank, it's just a shell. There's nothing there that could make it run." I walked over to see for myself, looked in through the broken window at those empty frost-covered seats. Walked around to the front, popped the hood with shaking hands. Where an engine should have been, there was just an empty compartment. Clean, no oil stains, no residue, no sign that anything had ever been there. But I could still hear it. Could still hear that rough idle, that distinctive knock of a failing motor. Could still smell the exhaust. Still see it pouring out from a tailpipe that led to nothing. "Everyone's hearing this, right?" I asked the engine. The hazmat team leader nodded slowly. "We're hearing it, but it's not real. It can't be real." We stood there in the growing daylight in that field of impossible exhaust, listening to an engine that didn't exist, looking at a truck that should have had people in it but didn't. And I thought about that driver, that dark shape I'd seen behind the wheel, asking over and over to be let through. Thought about those other shapes in the passenger seats. Thought about those 2 long fingers I'd glimpsed. The sergeant made the call to impound the vehicle. They loaded it onto a flatbed, and as they drove it away, the sound of the engine faded. The exhaust started to thin, finally dissipating the way normal exhaust should. By 7:30, there was no evidence anything unusual had happened. Just an empty stretch of road, a barrier arm, and a border crossing getting ready for the morning traffic. I gave my statement. Callum gave his. The RCMP officers gave theirs. The hazmat team filed their report. And all of us, every single person who'd been there, confirmed the same impossible things. A truck with no engine that ran. Occupants we could see who weren't there. A driver who spoke without being present. They sent me home after that. Told me to take a few days off, get some rest. I haven't slept well since. Every time I close my eyes, I see that dark shape behind the wheel. I hear that flat voice saying the same thing over and over. You need to open the barrier. The truck never showed up in any database. No record of it crossing into the States. No record of it existing at all. The VN had been ground off. There was nothing to trace. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. The thing I can't stop thinking about. 3 days after it happened, I was reviewing the camera footage from that night, going over it frame by frame, trying to make sense of what we'd all seen, and I found something. Right around 3:46 in the morning, just after the truck first appeared on camera, there's a moment where the image glitches just for a second. When it comes back, the truck is there. But if you go back and look at the footage from 3:45 from before the glitch, the road is empty, completely empty. The truck didn't drive up to the barrier. It didn't approach from either direction. It just appeared. And in the timestamp of that glitch, if you look close enough, you can see the numbers don't add up, right? It jumps from 34,559 to 34,701. A whole minute is missing. 60 seconds where the camera just stopped recording. I asked the tech guys about it. They said it was probably just a malfunction. These things happen. Old equipment, cold weather, electrical interference. But I've checked the footage from every other night, every other shift. I've gone back months. The timestamp has never glitched before, never jumped, never lost time. Just that one night, just when the truck appeared. I'm writing this at the end of my shift. It's 3:40 in the morning, mid-February again, almost exactly 1 year later. I'm alone in the booth. Renee is off sick. The radio is mostly static. And I keep looking at the monitor, watching the empty road from the American side, watching the time stamp tick over. 34,530, 34,545, 34,559. The numbers keep counting. No glitch, no jump, but I can hear something over the wind. Something that sounds like an engine running rough, getting closer. And I'm not sure if I want to see what's about to come into view at that barrier, or if I should just leave my booth, get in my car, and drive as far from here as I can. The timestamp rolls over. 346. No glitch, but there are headlights on the road now. A single vehicle moving slow. And I can see even from here that it doesn't have any plates. The Rainy River Forest crossing isn't on any map tourists use. It's a logging road that technically marks the border between Ontario and Minnesota. Monitored more out of protocol than necessity. Most of what comes through is commercial timber trucks and the occasional hunter who got turned around in the woods. We don't even have a proper booth, just a checkpoint trailer with a generator, a space heater that barely works, and equipment that's older than I am. I'm Corin Belfi, and I've been working this route for 4 years. Before that, I was stationed at Fort Francis, dealing with actual traffic, actual people. I requested the transfer here after I got tired of the crowds, the noise, the constant stream of questions. Out here, it's quiet. Sometimes I go entire shifts without seeing anyone, just me, the trees, and the sound of wind through the pines. It's not for everyone. The isolation gets to some people. We had a guy last year who quit after 3 weeks, said he couldn't handle the silence. Said it felt like the forest was watching him. I understood what he meant, but I didn't mind it. There's something honest about a place that doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. The forest doesn't care about you, doesn't notice you. You're just another organism moving through it, no more important than a deer or a wolf. At least that's what I used to think. It was late November, that dead time between hunting season and the first real snows. The trees were bare, skeletal against a gray sky. Temperature was hovering just above freezing, cold enough that the mud on the logging road had gone hard, but not cold enough to kill off the smell of rotting leaves and standing water. I was scheduled for a 6 to 6 night shift, midnight to dawn, which meant 12 hours alone in the trailer with nothing but paperwork, and the occasional radio check-in. I arrived at the checkpoint just before midnight. Jules Pennington, the day guy, was waiting in his truck, engine running for heat. We did the handoff in the parking area, a small cleared space with room for maybe 3 vehicles. Quiet day, he said, handing me the log book. 3 logging trucks, all regular, no issues. Forecast looks clear, should be an easy one. Hope so, I'm getting too old for excitement. He grinned, but there was something in his expression. Attention I hadn't seen before. Listen, Corin, you got fresh batteries for the thermal camera? Should have. Why, I saw something weird on it this afternoon around 4 just before sunset. Heat signature out in the woods, maybe 200 yards north of the road. Human-sized, but the movement was wrong. I looked at him. Jules was solid. Been doing this work for 20 years. Not the type to jump at shadows. Wrong how? Can't explain it. Just not how people move. Figured it was probably a bear, but bears don't usually register that hard. And the signature was too narrow, too vertical. You check it out. Started to got about 50 yards in and decided I didn't want to be out there alone in the dark. Radioed it in, but you know how that goes. I knew dispatch would log it, file it, maybe send someone to check in a day or 2 if they remembered. Resources out here were stretched thin. Unless there was an active threat, we were expected to handle things ourselves. I'll keep an eye out, I said. Yeah, you do that. He put his truck in gear, then stopped. One more thing, the signature. When I was watching it on the camera before I went out there, it looked like it was watching me, like it knew where the camera was. He drove off before I could ask what he meant by that. I headed into the trailer, flipped on the lights, started the generator. The space heater kicked in with a rattle pushing barely warm air into the small interior. I had my dinner in a cooler, a thermos of coffee, a book I'd been working through. Standard setup for a quiet night. The equipment was basic radio, computer terminal connected to our database, a monitor showing the camera feed from the road, and the thermal camera, a handheld unit we used for checking the woods after hours. It had a screen about the size of a phone, showed heat signatures in white and yellow against a black background. We mostly used it to track wildlife or check for people who might be crossing illegally through the forest instead of at the checkpoint. I did my initial sweep just after midnight, stepped outside with the thermal camera, panned it slowly across the terrain. The forest lit up in shades of gray and white, small signatures everywhere, squirrels probably, maybe a few birds, nothing human-sized, nothing unusual. I went back inside, logged the sweep in the book, poured myself coffee. The night settled in around the trailer. Wind picked up, rattling the metal siding. I could hear the trees creaking, branches rubbing against each other. Normal sounds, expected sounds. Around 1:30 I did another sweep. Same result. Empty forest, small animal signatures, nothing to report. I was starting to think Jules had spooked himself over nothing. At 2:15, the motion sensor on the road camera triggered. I looked at the monitor. A deer was crossing the logging road, moving slowly from the American side to the Canadian side. It stopped in the middle, looked directly at the camera like it knew it was there, then continued into the woods. I logged it. Deer crossing northbound, normal activity. I settled back into my book, only half paying attention to it. The isolation out here does something to your mind, makes you hyper-aware of sounds, of small changes in your environment. I found myself listening to the wind, tracking its rhythm, noticing when it paused or shifted direction. Found myself glancing at the monitor more than I needed to, watching that empty stretch of road. At 3:07, the motion sensor triggered again. I looked at the monitor. At first, I didn't see anything. Just empty road, darkness, trees on either side. Then I saw it. Movement at the edge of the frame right where the road disappeared into the American side. Something was coming toward the checkpoint. I watched the monitor. Whatever it was stayed just at the edge of visibility, moving through the shadows under the trees. I couldn't make out a shape, just movement. Something shifting from one patch of darkness to another. I grabbed the thermal camera and went outside. The cold hit me immediately. Temperature had dropped while I'd been inside. My breath came out in clouds. The wind had died down completely, leaving the forest in an eerie stillness. No sound, no movement in the trees, just silence. I raised the thermal camera, pointed it toward the road. At first, I didn't see anything, just the cooling pavement. Faint heat signatures from where the deer had crossed. I panned left toward the American side. There it was, a heat signature, definitely human-sized, vertical, But Jules was right. The movement was wrong. Most mammals move in a predictable pattern. There's a rhythm to it, a cadence. This thing didn't have that. It moved in starts and stops, quick jerks forward followed by complete stillness. And the signature itself was strange, too bright in some places, too dim in others. A normal human shows up on thermal fairly uniform, hotter in the core, slightly cooler at the extremities. This thing had hot spots that didn't make sense. Patches of intense heat at the shoulders, at the knees, at the base of the spine. It was about 100 yards away, moving through the forest parallel to the road. Not heading toward the checkpoint, not heading away, just moving along the tree line, stopping, moving again. I lowered the camera and tried to see it with normal vision. Nothing, just dark trees and darker shadows. Raised the camera again. It was closer now, maybe 70 yards, still moving in that jerky wrong way, still showing those strange hot spots. I went back inside, grabbed the radio. Dispatch, this is Rainy River Forest. Static. Then, go ahead, Rainy River. I've got a possible heat signature in the woods north of the checkpoint. Human-sized, but movement pattern is unusual. Requesting advice. Long pause, more static. Can you determine if it's human? I looked through the thermal camera again. The signature had stopped moving. It was standing completely still, maybe 50 yards from the road. As I watched, it rotated slowly, deliberately, until it was facing directly toward the checkpoint. Directly toward me. Unknown. It's not moving like a person. Could be wildlife, but the signature is too vertical. Do you feel threatened? I wasn't sure. It wasn't approaching, it was just standing there watching. But there was something about the way it had turned, the way it was oriented directly at me that made my skin crawl. Negative, not approaching checkpoint, maintaining distance. Keep monitoring, log the activity. If it approaches the road or checkpoint, call it in immediately, copy that. I put the radio down and looked at the thermal camera again. The signature was still there, still facing me. And as I watched, one of those hot spots, the one at what I assumed was shoulder height, began to move. It detached from the main signature, extended outward into the space beside the figure. It was raising an arm, not in a wave, not in any kind of greeting or communication, just raising it, extending it perpendicular to its body, and then it stopped, held that position. A perfect T-shape on the thermal display. I felt my heart rate pick up. There was no good reason for a person to be standing in the forest at 3:00 in the morning on the American side of an unmarked border crossing, raising one arm and holding it there. No good reason at all. I stepped outside again, this time bringing a flashlight. I pointed it toward where the signature should be, flipped it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminated the trees, the underbrush, the trunks standing like pillars in the forest. I swept it back and forth, covering the area where the thermal camera showed the signature. Nothing, no person, no animal, just empty forest. I turned off the flashlight, raised the thermal camera. The signature was still there. Same position, arm still extended, but now it was closer, maybe 30 yards. I hadn't seen it move on the camera, hadn't seen it approach. It had just covered 20 yards in the time it took me to turn on a flashlight. "Hey," I called out. My voice sounded thin in the still air. "This is Canadian Border Services. Identify yourself." No response. The signature didn't move, didn't lower its arm, just stood there. I tried again. "You're approaching a border checkpoint. I need you to identify yourself and state your business." Silence. Complete silence. Not even the wind. I backed toward the trailer, keeping the thermal camera pointed at the signature. It started moving again, not toward me, not away, laterally parallel to the road, maintaining that 30 distance, and its arm stayed extended the whole time. That perpendicular limb not moving, not swaying, just locked in position as the rest of the body moved. That's when I realized what was wrong with the movement. It wasn't walking. The signature wasn't showing the typical gait pattern of a human or large animal. There was no up and down motion, no weight transfer from one leg to another. It was gliding, smooth and continuous, like it was on rails. I got back inside the trailer and locked the door. My hands were shaking. I set the thermal camera on the desk and tried to calm down, tried to think through what I was seeing. There had to be a rational explanation. Equipment malfunction, thermal reflection off water or ice creating a false signature, some kind of atmospheric phenomenon. I didn't understand. I looked at the road camera monitor. The motion sensor hadn't triggered again. The road was empty. I picked up the thermal camera and looked through it, pointing it out the trailer window toward where the signature had been. It was right outside, 5 yards from the trailer, standing completely still, arms still extended. I dropped the camera. When I picked it up again, the signature had moved. It was at the side of the trailer now, close enough that I could see details in the heat pattern. The signature was roughly human-shaped, but the proportions were wrong, too tall, limbs too long, and those hot spots I'd noticed earlier were clearer now. They weren't joints or organs. They were clustered, bunched at the shoulders, the hips, the knees. Like whatever this thing was had too many heat sources in those areas, like it had too many parts. I grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, Rainy River, I need backup out here. Rainy River, what's your situation? I've got an unknown contact at the checkpoint. Thermal signature not consistent with human or known wildlife. Contact is not responding to verbal commands. Are you in danger?" I looked at the thermal camera. The signature had moved again. It was at the door now, standing right outside. If I opened the door, if I stepped out, I would walk directly into it. I don't know. Contact is at the trailer entrance. I'm securing the position. Backup is 40 minutes out. Do you have somewhere secure you can wait 40 minutes? I looked around the trailer. It was basically a metal box, not designed for security. The door was flimsy. The windows were just single-pane glass. If whatever was outside wanted to get in, it could. Negative, no secure location. I'm staying in the trailer. Copy that, back up en route. Stay on the line if you can. I kept the radio in one hand and the thermal camera in the other. Through the camera, I could see the signature just standing there, not moving, not trying the door, just standing. The extended arm was at the door handle height, almost like it was reaching for it, almost like it was about to knock. Minutes passed, 5, 10. I kept watching the signature. It didn't move, didn't change position, just stood there in that impossible T-shape, bright against the cold background of the forest. Then slowly the arm began to lower. Not quickly, not in any kind of natural motion. Just a steady descent, degree by degree, until it was back at the signature side. And then the whole signature began to change. The hot spots I'd seen earlier started to shift, to migrate through the body. They moved from the shoulders down to the torso, from the knees up to the hips, like whatever heat sources were inside this thing were relocating, reorganizing. The signature began to elongate. The vertical orientation stretched, became taller, narrower. The limbs extended, became longer, thinner. What had been roughly human-shaped was now something else. Something that didn't match any animal I knew. Too tall, too thin, limbs at wrong angles, and it was changing its position, not moving away from the trailer, moving around it. I could track it on the thermal camera as it circled the structure, always maintaining contact with the wall. Its heat signature was so bright now, it was washing out the details. Just a white shape moving around the trailer, touching the metal siding, leaving traces of heat where it had been. It completed one full circle and stopped at the door again. And then it did something that made me drop the camera. It separated. The signature split down the middle. What had been one shape became 2, then 4, then 6. Multiple heat sources, all roughly the same size, all standing in a cluster outside the door, like it had broken apart, like it had never been one thing to begin with. I backed away from the door into the far corner of the trailer. I could hear something now, a sound I hadn't noticed before. A soft scraping, like fingernails on metal all around the trailer, multiple points. The signatures were touching the walls, the door, the window frames, testing them, examining them. The radio crackled. "Rainy River, backup is 30 minutes out. What's your status?" I couldn't speak, couldn't form words. Just stood there listening to that scraping sound, watching the thermal camera on the desk showing those multiple signatures clustered around the trailer. "Rainy River, respond." I grabbed the radio. "Still here. Contact has multiplied. Multiple signatures now all around the structure. Multiplied, explain, it's split. The single signature split into multiple smaller signatures. 6, maybe 7, all showing the same heat pattern. Silence on the other end. Then, are you certain your equipment is functioning properly?" I looked at the thermal camera. The signatures were moving again, circling the trailer, always in contact with the walls. And then one of them stopped at the window. I could see it clearly on the camera, a bright white shape, vertical, pressed against the glass. I turned to look at the window with normal vision. Nothing, just darkness outside. Condensation on the glass from the temperature difference. My own reflection staring back at me, but through the thermal camera, I could see it clearly. A heat signature right there, inches from my face, separated only by a thin pane of glass. Equipment appears functional, I told dispatch. My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. Contact is at the window. Can you see it visually? Negative, only on thermal. Another long pause, Rainy River. We're treating this as a possible equipment malfunction. Backup will still proceed to your location, but for the time being, assume the signatures are false readings. Do not engage, copy that. But I knew it wasn't a malfunction. I knew what I was seeing was real, even if it didn't make sense. Even if it violated everything I understood about how the world worked. The signature at the window began to change shape again. It compressed, became wider, shorter. More heat spots appeared clustered in the upper portion. And then I realized what I was looking at. A face. It was forming something like a face. Multiple heat sources arranged in a rough approximation of eyes, a nose, a mouth. Not accurate, not really human, but intentional, like it was trying to communicate, like it was trying to show me something familiar. I stepped closer to the window, still watching through the thermal camera. The face shape shifted, refined itself. The heat sources reorganized, creating clearer features. And then for just a moment, I thought I saw something in the arrangement. A pattern I almost recognized. A configuration of features that looked almost like someone I knew, like Jules, like the face of Jules Pennington, the day guy. The one who'd warned me about seeing something weird on the thermal camera. But that wasn't possible. Jules had gone home hours ago. He was 40 m away. He couldn't be outside my window in the middle of the forest. The face shape held for a few more seconds, then dissolved. The heat sources scattered, reformed into multiple smaller signatures, and then those signatures began to move away from the trailer into the forest, spreading out in different directions. I watched them on the thermal camera, watched them move between the trees, maintaining those strange heat patterns, that impossible movement. Watched them until they were out of range, lost among the background radiation of the forest. The scraping sound stopped. The trailer went quiet. Just me and the hum of the generator and the barely working space heater. I stood there for a long time, thermal camera in my hand, watching the empty forest, waiting for the signatures to come back. They didn't. The woods were empty, normal, just trees and shadows, and the small heat signatures of regular wildlife going about their business. When backup arrived 30 minutes later, they found me still standing at the window. They checked the perimeter, searched the woods with their own thermal cameras, found nothing, no tracks, no evidence of anyone or anything having been near the trailer, no signs of disturbance. They reviewed the footage from the road camera. It showed nothing, just me stepping outside twice, pointing a flashlight at the woods. No signatures, no movement. They tested the thermal camera. It functioned normally. No malfunction, no false readings. The incident report said I'd experienced a probable equipment glitch, possibly combined with fatigue and the stress of isolation. They recommended a psychological evaluation and suggested I take some time off. I never told them about the face I saw, never mentioned that it looked like Jules. That seemed like a step too far, like admitting to something that would get me permanently pulled from duty. They reassigned me after that, put me on day shifts at a busier crossing. I didn't argue. Didn't request to stay at Rainy River. Truth was, I didn't want to go back there. Didn't want to spend another night alone in that trailer, watching the forest, waiting for something to come out of the dark. But I did call Jules few weeks after it happened. Asked him about what he'd seen that afternoon before my shift. Asked him to describe the heat signature more specifically. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "It didn't move like a person, Corin. It moved like it was learning, like it was watching how things are supposed to move and trying to figure it out. And when I went into the woods, when I got close to where it should have been, I felt like I was being measured, like something was looking at me and taking notes. Did you see it form any shapes, any recognizable patterns?" Another long pause. "Yeah, right before I gave up and came back to the trailer, the signature changed, compressed, and for just a second, it looked like my daughter. She died 3 years ago, cancer. But there it was on the thermal camera, plain as day, her face, her exact face. He hung up after that. I tried calling back. He didn't answer. I still have the thermal camera. They let me keep it when they reassigned me. Said I'd earned it after 4 years of isolated duty. Sometimes I take it out and scan my apartment. Scan the walls, the windows, the empty spaces. looking for those heat signatures, those bright spots that don't belong. I haven't seen them again, not yet, but I know they're out there in the forests, in the empty places where people don't go, learning, watching, forming shapes that don't exist, trying to understand what it means to be something they're not. And I think about what Jules said, about being measured, about something, taking notes. I think about that face I saw in the thermal signature, how clearly it showed Jules's features, how perfect the replication was, even though there was no actual face there. Just heat sources arranged in a pattern, just information organized to look like something familiar. And I wonder what else it learned that night, what other patterns it recorded, what other faces it might show to the next person who works a shift at Rainy River Forest Crossing. I wonder if it learned my face too. Sometimes late at night, I look at myself in the mirror. I study my features, the arrangement of my eyes, my nose, my mouth, the specific configuration that makes me recognizable as myself. And I imagine those heat sources reorganizing, clustering, forming a pattern that matches what I'm seeing. I imagine something out there in the forest, invisible to normal vision, showing my face to someone else, using it, trying to communicate, trying to show them something familiar, trying to prove it's human when it's not. The Thousand Islands crossing isn't like the others. Most border checkpoints deal with roads, vehicles, solid ground. We deal with water. The St. Lawrence River cuts through here, creating hundreds of small islands that belong to either Canada or America, depending on which side of the invisible line they fall. During summer, it's a tourist paradise. Boats everywhere, people island hopping, fishing, swimming. During winter, it's something else entirely. My name's Lambert Krikska, and I've been working the water patrol for 6 years. We operate out of a small station on Hill Island, monitoring boat traffic, checking fishing licenses, making sure people know which water belongs to which country. Most of it's educational. Tourists get confused, cross into Canadian waters without realizing. We point them back the right way, no big deal. The locals know better, but even they slip up sometimes. Winter changes everything. The river never freezes completely. Not anymore, but it gets close. Ice forms in chunks and sheets, drifting with the current, building up around the islands. Navigation becomes dangerous. Most people with any sense stay on shore. The ones who don't are usually ice fishermen, and we keep a special eye on them. Every year, someone goes through thin ice, ends up in water cold enough to kill you in minutes. It was mid-December, late on a Friday night. I was finishing up paperwork at the station when I got a call from the American side. Coast Guard down in Alexandria Bay. They'd picked up something odd on their radar. A small boat, maybe 14 FT, moving through the channel between American and Canadian water. No lights, no transponder, moving slow. They wanted to know if we could check it out. I looked at the time, almost 11. Temperature was just above freezing, but the wind off the river made it feel colder. I didn't want to go out there, but that's the job. Someone's on the water in the dark. They might be in trouble, might need help. I called Bryony Kerr, our first aid tech. She was still at the station doing inventory. You up for a water run? Coast Guard spotted a boat in the channel. This late? What kind of idiot goes out there at night? The kind we need to check on, she sighed. Give me 5 minutes. We took one of the patrol boats, a rigid hull inflatable with decent lighting and enough power to handle the current. The river was rough, choppy from the wind. Ice chunks knocked against the hull as we pushed into the channel. I kept the spotlight sweeping, looking for the boat the Americans had reported. Where exactly are we looking? Brian asked. She was at the bow, scanning with binoculars. They said somewhere between Wellesley Island and Hill. Small boat, no lights. Great. So we're looking for a dark object on dark water in the dark. That's about it. We motored slowly through the channel, spotlight playing across the water. I could see chunks of ice caught in the current, could see the shadows of trees on the islands, could see the lights of houses on the American side. What I couldn't see was a boat. We were about to give up and head back when Brian grabbed my arm there. 10:00, I turned the spotlight, caught something in the beam. A small boat maybe 40 yards out, drifting with the current. It was facing us, bow pointing in our direction, but I couldn't see anyone in it. The boat was dark. No running lights, no cabin lights, just a small fishing boat empty as far as I could tell. You see anyone? I called to Bree. Negative, looks abandoned. I brought us closer, keeping the spotlight on it. As we approached, I could make out more details. It was an aluminium fishing boat, old, probably 70s or 80s vintage, the kind you see at bait shops for a few $100. There was a small outboard motor on the back, but I couldn't tell if it was running. No sound of an engine, just the boat sitting there rocking with the swells. And then I saw the silhouette. Someone was sitting in the boat, not at the controls, not moving, just sitting in the middle section, hunched over, facing away from us. "Hey," I called out. "This is Canadian Border Services. Are you all right?" No response. The figure didn't move, didn't turn around. I brought our boat alongside, killed the engine. "Sir, ma'am, can you hear me?" Nothing. Brian grabbed a line, started to pull the boats together. "Wait," I said. Something felt wrong. The way that figure was sitting, completely still, not reacting to our lights, our voices, the sound of our engine, like it wasn't aware we were there. "What's wrong?" Bryony asked. "Just give me a second." I grabbed my flashlight, aimed it at the figure. The beam caught a dark shape hunched in the center of the boat. I could see the outline of a head, shoulders, torso, but I couldn't see any details. No face, no clothing texture, just a dark mass. "I'm going to shine a light in the cabin," I told Bryony. "Be ready to pull us away if I say so." I shifted the flashlight, pointed it into the boat's interior. The beam swept across aluminium seats, a tackle box, fishing rods, and then it hit the figure. The cabin was empty. I blinked, moved the light back. Where I'd seen the silhouette, there was nothing, just empty space. An empty boat. "Did you see someone in there?" I asked Brian. "Yeah, someone sitting in the middle." "Why, look again." She raised her binoculars, looked at the boat. "What the hell? There's no one there." I kept the light on the empty cabin. No one, no person, no explanation for the silhouette we'd both seen. Optical illusion. Bryony suggested shadow from the angle. I moved our boat, changed the angle of our lights, looked again, still empty. But I could have sworn I'd seen someone sitting there. Could have sworn I'd seen a figure hunched in that boat facing away from us. "We should secure it," I said. "Bring it back to the station. Someone's missing a boat." Bryony threw a line across, tied the boats together. I killed our lights except for the running lights, and we started to tow it back to Hill Island. As we moved through the channel, I kept looking back at the empty boat, trying to figure out what I'd seen, trying to convince myself it had just been shadows, angle, my eyes playing tricks in the dark. We were halfway back to the station when I noticed the smell. Damp, musty, like standing water and rotting vegetation. It was coming from the fishing boat, getting stronger as we towed it. I could see Bryony smelling it too, her nose wrinkling. "That boat been sitting somewhere for a while," she said. "Smells like a swamp." I looked at the boat again. In the glow of our running lights, I could see water in the bottom. Not a lot, maybe an inch or two, but enough to explain the smell. Someone had left this boat somewhere, hadn't maintained it, and it had taken on water. We pulled up to the dock at the station, secured both boats. I stepped into the fishing boat to check it more thoroughly. The water in the bottom was cold, murky. I could see leaves floating in it, bits of plant matter. My boots squatched as I moved around. The tackle box was rusted shut. The fishing rods were old, the line brittle and tangled. The outboard motor was seized. Hadn't run in years by the look of it. This boat had been abandoned for a long time, but that didn't explain how it had been moving through the channel. Didn't explain how the Coast Guard had tracked it on radar, seen it traveling through the water. "Check the bow," Brain said. "See if there's a registration number." I moved forward, careful not to slip on the wet aluminium. The bow was partially covered by a small canvas cover, rotten and torn. I pulled it back. Underneath was a pile of papers, waterlogged, stuck together. The ink run to illegibility. I pulled them out carefully, trying not to tear them. Some kind of documents, forms maybe. I couldn't read them, couldn't make out what they said, but I could see one word repeated on several pages, still partially legible. "Deceased." I looked at Bryony. "Get on the radio. Call Alexandria Bay. Ask them if they have any records of missing persons on the river. Specifically, anyone associated with the fishing boat." She went back to our patrol boat, got on the radio. I stayed in the fishing boat, looking at those documents, trying to piece together what I was seeing. The papers felt wrong, too old, too degraded, like they'd been in water not for hours or days, but for months, maybe years. Bryony came back. "Coast Guard's checking their records. They want to know if we found any identification, just these papers. Can't read most of them. They're sending someone over. Should be here in 20 minutes. We waited at the dock, both of us standing there looking at the fishing boat. The smell was stronger now, that damp rot smell, and there was something else. A feeling like we were being watched, like someone was looking at us from somewhere we couldn't see. I checked the boat again, swept it with my flashlight. Empty, just aluminium, water, those ruined papers. No one there, no explanation for that feeling. The Coast Guard arrived right on schedule. 2 officers in a Boston were professional and efficient. They came aboard, examined the boat, looked at the papers. One of them, a guy named Martinez, pulled out his phone and made a call, talked quietly for a minute, then hung up. "We have a record," he said. "Fishing boat matching this description. Reported lost in 2019. Owner was a local fisherman named Donald Cartwright. He went out one night, never came back. They found his boat 3 days later drifting in the middle of the river. No sign of him. Assumed he fell overboard, drowned." 5 years ago, I asked. "Yeah, boat was impounded, put in storage, should still be there. This the same boat?" Martinez looked at the registration number I'd found on the hall, made another call. We could hear him talking to someone, getting confirmation. When he hung up, his expression had changed. More serious, more confused. "The boat in storage is still there. I just talked to the yard supervisor. He can see it from his office. So either we're looking at a different boat with the same registration or what?" Bryony asked. "Or something's wrong with our records." We stood there looking at the boat, at the water in the bottom, the rusted tackle box, the degraded papers, at a fishing boat that should have been in storage but was drifting in the channel instead. "We're going to take this back to Alexandria Bay," Martinez said. "Get it properly examined. In the meantime, if you see any other boats like this, anything unusual, call it in immediately." They hooked a line to the fishing boat and towed it away. Brian and I went back to the station, filled out the incident report. Unexplained vessel, possible registration discrepancy, referred to U.S. Coast Guard for investigation. I thought that would be the end of it. Thought I'd never hear about that boat again. Just another weird night on the river. Another story to file away. But 2 nights later, it came back. I was on solo patrol running a sweep of the Canadian islands when I saw it. Same boat, same aluminium hull, same dark silhouette sitting in the middle, hunched over, facing away. I radioed it in immediately. "Station, this is Kitska. I've got that fishing boat again, the one from Friday. It's in the channel between Grenadier and Thwartway." Silence on the radio. Then, "Lambert, that's not possible. That boat is impounded in Alexandria Bay. I'm looking right at it. Same boat, same position in the water. Are you sure?" I brought my patrol boat closer, shined the spotlight on it. Same aluminium hull, same rusted tackle box, same canvas cover and same silhouette. Someone sitting in the middle, motionless. "I'm sure it's the same boat. We're sending backup. Don't approach until they arrive." But I was already approaching, already pulling alongside. I had to know, had to see if there was really someone in there this time or if it was another illusion, another trick of shadows and angles. I grabbed the line, pulled the boats together, shined my flashlight into the cabin, empty just like before. No one there, just wet aluminium and those ruined papers and that smell of rot and standing water. But I could see the silhouette, could see it clearly, a figure hunched in the middle of the boat facing away from me. I could see it with my peripheral vision, could see it in the corner of my eye, but when I looked directly at it, there was nothing. I stepped into the boat. The water in the bottom was deeper now, maybe 4 in, cold and murky, with more plant matter floating in it. My boots splashed as I moved toward where the silhouette should be. "Hello," I called out. "Is someone here?" The silhouette shifted. I saw it move, saw the shoulders rotate, the head turn like it was looking at me. But when I pointed my flashlight at it, there was nothing, just empty space. I backed toward my patrol boat. This wasn't right. This wasn't natural. I needed to get away from this thing, needed to call in more support, needed to figure out what the hell I was dealing with. As I stepped back into my boat, I saw something in the water at the bottom of the fishing boat. Something white, partially submerged in that murky water. I leaned closer, shined my light on it. It was a hand, pale, waterlogged, fingers slightly curled, not attached to anything, just a hand lying in the water, palm up like it was reaching for something. I jerked back, nearly fell into the river, caught myself on the rail of my boat, breathing hard. When I looked again, the hand was gone. Just water, just darkness. Backup arrived 10 minutes later. 2 officers from the station, both of them looking skeptical until they saw the boat, saw that it was the same vessel we'd impounded 2 days ago, the same boat that should have been sitting in a Coast Guard facility in Alexandria Bay. We towed it back to the station again. This time, we pulled it completely out of the water up onto the dock. We wanted to examine it in the light. wanted to figure out how this was possible. In the light, we could see more details. The boat was in terrible condition. The aluminium was corroded, eaten through in places. The seats were rotted. The tackle box had rust holes. This boat had been in the water for years, way longer than 2 days, but that wasn't possible. We'd impounded it Friday night. Today was Sunday. There's no way it could have degraded this much in 48 hours. We called the Coast Guard. Martinez came back over, took one look at the boat, and went pale. "That's not the same boat," he said. "The registration number matches," I told him. "I don't care. The boat we impounded Friday is still in our facility. I can call right now and have someone verify." He made the call, put it on speaker. We listened as someone at the Alexandria Bay facility confirmed that yes, the impounded boat was still there, still secured, still tagged with the same case number. "Then what's this?" I asked, pointing at the boat on our dock. "I don't know, but it's not the one we took in." We stood there, all of us, looking at a boat that shouldn't exist, looking at a vessel with the same registration as one that was locked up 40 m away, looking at something that had appeared in the river twice in 3 days, drifting with no engine, occupied by a figure that disappeared when you looked directly at it. Martinez made more calls, got more people involved. By morning, we had representatives from both Canadian and American Coast Guard. A couple of local police officers and a guy from the Department of Fisheries. Everyone taking photos, measuring, documenting, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. They pulled the papers from the bottom of the boat. Most were a label, but a few words could be made out. Names, dates, and that word again, deceased. Someone ran the partial names through a database, found 3 matches, 3 fishermen who'd gone missing on the St. Lawrence over the past 20 years. 3 people who'd been out on the water and never came back. Their bodies were never recovered. One of them was Donald Cartwright, the owner of the original boat. The investigation went on for weeks. They compared the 2 boats, the one in our possession and the one in the Alexandria Bay facility. They were identical. Same model, same year, same registration number, same wear patterns, same rust marks, like they were copies of each other, or like one had somehow duplicated itself. The prevailing theory, the one that ended up in the official reports, was that someone had found another boat of the same model, altered the registration to match Cartwright's boat, and set it adrift as some kind of prank. The silhouette we'd seen was explained as a trick of light and shadow. The smell was just old water and organic decay. The hand I'd seen was a hallucination brought on by stress and poor visibility. But I know what I saw. I know that boat appeared twice in the same week. I know there was something sitting in it, something that disappeared when you looked directly at it, but was there in your peripheral vision. Something that turned to look at me when I got close. And I know about the hand. They never found an explanation for that. Never found any evidence of it. But I saw it white and waterlogged and reaching up from the bottom of that boat. We burned the boat eventually. Coast Guard regulations, something about contaminated materials and environmental hazards. They pulled it up onto the shore of an uninhabited island and set it on fire. I watched it burn, watched the aluminium melt, the wood char, the canvas cover curl up and turn to ash. Watched until there was nothing left but a blackened patch on the rocks. I thought that would be the end of it. Thought burning it would destroy whatever it was, would put an end to the sightings. But 3 weeks later, someone reported a small fishing boat drifting in the channel. Dark, no lights, moving with the current. They said there was someone in it. Someone sitting in the middle, hunched over, not responding to calls. I didn't take that call. I was off duty, deliberately scheduled away from water patrol. But I heard about it, heard they found the boat, towed it in, examined it. Same boat, same registration, same everything. They burned it again. And 3 weeks later it came back. It always comes back. We've stopped trying to explain it, stopped trying to impound it or destroy it. Now when someone reports it, we just log it, document the location, the time, the witness descriptions. We've got a file on it now, thick with reports, dozens of sightings over the past 6 months. Always the same boat, always the same silhouette, always drifting through the channel on dark nights. The theory among those of us who work the water is that it's some kind of echo, a memory of something that happened on the river. Donald Cartwright going out fishing one night and never coming back. His boat drifting for days before someone found it. And now somehow that moment is repeating, playing out over and over in the same stretch of water. But I don't think it's just Donald. I think it's all of them. All the people who have gone into the river and didn't come out. All the fishermen and boars and swimmers who disappeared into that cold water and were never found. I think they're all in that boat somehow. All represented by that silhouette that won't stay still, won't show itself, won't let itself be seen. I don't work the river anymore. I transferred to road duty 6 months ago. Took a pay cut. Took a less interesting position, but I don't care. I couldn't keep going out there. Couldn't keep seeing that boat, knowing what it was, knowing what it represented. But sometimes, late at night, I drive down to the shore. I park where I can see the channel and I watch, and sometimes I see it. A small dark shape moving through the water. No lights, no sound, just drifting with the current, occupied by something that shouldn't be there. And I wonder if someday it'll come for me. If one night I'll be out on the water and I'll see that boat approaching and I'll see the silhouette turn and I'll recognize the shape, the posture. I'll recognize myself because I think that's what it does. I think it shows you who's waiting, who's already in the water, who's already gone. And I think eventually everyone who works the river long enough will see themselves in that boat. Will see their own silhouette hunched in the middle, facing away, waiting for the living version to join them. I haven't seen myself yet, but I know other people who have. People who have been on the water longer than me. People who have worked these islands for decades. They don't talk about it much, but sometimes after a few drinks, they'll admit it. They'll say they saw themselves in that boat. Saw their own shape sitting there. And they'll say they know what it means. It means their time on the river is running out. It means sooner or later they're going into the water and they're not coming back. I think about Donald Cartwright a lot, about what he must have felt that night when he went through. If he knew what was happening, if he had time to be afraid, if he thought about his family, his life, all the things he'd never get to do. I think about him drifting in the dark, alone, cold, waiting for someone to find him. And I think about that boat still drifting, still carrying its invisible passenger, still looking for more people to add to its collection. The river takes people, it always has, and eventually it gives something back, just not in the way you'd want. The Armstrong Crossing handles mostly commercial traffic, trucks carrying goods between Thunder Bay and Minnesota, following Highway 61 north and south. We're not a big operation like Windsor or Sarnia, but we move enough volume to keep busy. Most drivers know the routine. Pull up, hand over paperwork, answer a few questions, get waved through. 15 minutes tops unless there's a problem. I'm Madak Thebedo, been working here for 8 years. Started on day shifts, moved to nights 3 years ago when my marriage fell apart and I needed the differential pay. The job's straightforward. Check documentation, verify cargo matches, manifest, look for anything suspicious. Drugs, weapons, undeclared goods. Most of the time we don't find anything. Most of the time it's just boxes of auto parts or lumber or manufactured goods moving across an invisible line. It was a Thursday in late February around 3:00 in the morning. Cold night, temperature in the low 20s, wind coming hard off Lake Superior 20 m east. We were in that dead period between the late night push and the early morning rush. I'd processed maybe 4 trucks in the last 2 hours, all regular drivers, all clean paperwork, all waved through without incident. I was in the booth reading incident reports from the previous shift when I saw headlights approaching from the American side. Big truck, 18-wheeler, moving at normal speed. I closed the folder and stepped outside. The truck pulled up to the barrier. White Freightliner looked to be about 10 years old, well-maintained. The cab was lit, and I could see the driver clearly through the windshield. Male, maybe late 40s, wearing a plaid jacket and a baseball cap. He looked tired, but then most long-haul drivers look tired at 3:00 in the morning. I approached the cab. The window came down. "Evening," I said. "Welcome to Canada. Can I see your paperwork, please?" The driver handed over a manifest and a commercial driver's license. I glanced at the license. Name was Richard Pelletier, Quebec address. The manifest showed a load of furniture components heading to a warehouse in Thunder Bay. "You come through here often, Mr. Pellier? Every couple weeks, same route." I looked at the manifest more closely. Everything seemed in order. Proper stamps, correct forms, declared value within normal range. "What's your pickup point?" "Duth picked up yesterday afternoon, and you're heading to Thunder Bay." "Delivery scheduled for 8:00 a.m. I checked my watch. 5 hours to make a 3-hour drive. He had plenty of time. "You mind if I take a look in the trailer?" He shrugged. "Go ahead, nothing to hide." I walked around to the back of the truck. The trailer doors were sealed with a standard custom seal number matching the one on the manifest. I broke it, opened the doors, shined my flashlight inside. Pallets of boxes, all properly secured, all labeled with shipping information. I climbed up, checked a few boxes at random. Furniture components just like the manifest said. Table legs, chair frames, cabinet doors, everything matched. Everything looked legitimate. I jumped down, closed the doors, attached a new seal, walked back to the cab, all set. I'm going to need you to pull over to secondary for a moment. Got a few questions about the load time. It was standard procedure. Something about the timeline felt slightly off. Not wrong enough to deny entry, but enough to warrant a few more questions. The driver nodded, put the truck in gear, pulled forward into the secondary inspection area. I went back to the booth, ran his license through the system. Richard Peller, clean record, no outstanding warrants, regular crossings documented over the past 3 years, everything normal. I grabbed my clipboard and walked over to the secondary area. The driver was waiting in the cab, engine running, looking at his phone. Sorry for the delay, I said. Just want to clarify a few things. You said you picked up in Duth yesterday afternoon. That's right, around 400 p.m. and the drive from Duth to here is about 5 hours. Bit less if traffic's light. So you should have been here around 9 last night. It's 3:00 a.m. Where were you for the past 6 hours? He looked confused. What do you mean? I drove straight through. Stopped once for coffee about an hour ago. I've been driving maybe 4 hours total. Mr. Pellier, if you picked up at 4:00 and drove straight through, you should have arrived here hours ago. I'm telling you I left Duth around 10:30, maybe 11, not 4. I looked at the manifest. Pickup time clearly stated 16 400 p.m. Your paperwork says 4 p.m. He grabbed the manifest from me, looked at it. His expression changed. That's not right. I didn't pick up at 4:00. I was still in Duth at 6:00. Had dinner. Didn't load until after 8. Then why does your manifest say 4? I don't know. That's when I was scheduled to pick up, but the load wasn't ready. They kept me waiting. I didn't actually load until after 8. Like I said, I made a note. Okay, so you loaded around 8, left Duth around 10:30. Should have been here around 3:30. That timeline works. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was weird when I saw the time on your booth. Thought maybe I'd lost track, been driving longer than I thought. But no, 4 hours sounds right. I let him go, told him to get his manifest corrected at the delivery point, make sure the paperwork matched reality. He seemed relieved, pulled out of the secondary area, headed north toward Thunder Bay. I went back to the booth, logged the stop. Minor discrepancy in documentation. Driver provided reasonable explanation. Allowed to proceed. Standard stuff. 40 minutes later, I saw headlights approaching from the American side again. White freight liner. Same truck, same driver. I stepped outside, watched it pull up to the barrier. The driver's window came down. Same face, Richard Peller, same tired expression, same plaid jacket and baseball cap. He handed me paperwork. Same manifest, same commercial license. I looked at it, looked at him. Mr. Pellier, you just came through here 40 minutes ago. He looked confused. No, I didn't. This is my first time at this crossing tonight. I just processed you, checked your trailer, sent you on to Thunder Bay. I don't know what you're talking about. I've been driving straight from Duth, just got here. I felt a cold prickle run down my spine. This was the same man, same truck, same paperwork, but he genuinely seemed to have no memory of crossing 40 minutes ago. Sir, you need to step out of the vehicle. What? Why? Just step out, please, now. He complied, looking worried. I called for backup on my radio, requested a supervisor. While I waited, I walked around the truck. Same white Freightliner, same license plate, same everything, but the seal on the trailer was different. The number didn't match the one I'd put on 40 minutes ago. Mr. Pellier, when did you seal this trailer in Duth when I loaded? What time was that? Around 8:30, maybe 9. And you've driven straight here? No stops. Well, I stopped for coffee about an hour ago. Little place just south of the border. Did you open the trailer, check the load? No, why would I? My supervisor arrived 10 minutes later. Soren Hallberg, a former RCMP officer who'd moved to border services for the better hours. I explained the situation. Same driver, same truck, same manifest showing up twice in under an hour. Soren looked at Pellier. You have any explanation for this? I don't know what he's talking about. This is my first time through tonight. You got a phone. Something with GPS. Pellier pulled out his phone. Soren took it, opened the location history. We could see the truck's road clearly. Duth to Armstrong, straight line, no deviations. According to the GPS, Pellier had left Duth at 10:47 p.m. and driven directly to the crossing. No stops, no delays. Arrival time 3:02 a.m., which was exactly when I'd processed him the first time. The GPS says you were here at 3:02, I told him. Yeah, that's when I arrived. It's 3:45 now. He looked at his watch. No, it's not, it's just after 3. I showed him my watch. 3:47 a.m. showed him the clock on the booth. 3:47 a.m. showed him his own phone. 3:04 a.m. his phone was running 43 minutes behind. Soren and I exchanged looks. Check the trailer, he said. We walked to the back, broke the seal, opened the doors, same contents, pallets of furniture components. But when I climbed up to examine them, something felt different. The boxes were in the same positions, the same labels, but they looked older somehow. The cardboard was more worn. The tape was yellowed. I opened one of the boxes, table legs just like before, but these were dusty, like they'd been sitting in storage for months, not picked up yesterday. How long ago did you say you loaded this? I asked Pellier. Last night around 8:30. These boxes look like they've been sitting for a while. They're furniture components. They sit in warehouses. That's normal. He was right. But something about this didn't feel normal. Soren made the call to impound the truck. We needed to figure out what was happening. Needed to understand how the same driver could show up twice with the same cargo in the same truck with no memory of the first crossing. We pulled the truck into the impound area, secured it, took Pellier to the office, sat him down, tried to piece together his timeline. Okay, Soren said, walk us through your day, everything you did from the time you woke up to the time you arrived here. Pellier thought about it. Woke up around noon yesterday. I'd been driving the night before, needed to sleep in, had lunch, drove to the pickup point in Duth. Got there around 4, but the load wasn't ready, waited around, had dinner at a diner down the street. Came back around 8, loaded the truck, hit the road around 10:30, stopped for coffee around 2:00, got here just after 3. What diner? Place called Angie's on Superior Street. Soren made a call, spoke to someone in Duth, asked them to check if there was a diner called Angie's on Superior Street. There was. Asked if they could check their receipts from yesterday evening, see if they had a charge from a Richard Pelletier. The answer came back 10 minutes later. Yes. Receipt time-stamped at 6:47 p.m., which matched Pellier's story, which meant he had loaded after 8, which meant he should have been at the crossing around 3:00 a.m., which was when I'd first processed him. And now it was almost 4:00 in the morning, and we had the same driver sitting in our office claiming it was his first time through with a phone that was running 43 minutes slow. Mr. Pellier, I said, do you remember crossing the border? Do you remember talking to me? No, I remember driving. I remember seeing the signs for the crossing. I remember pulling up to the barrier, but I don't remember crossing. Don't remember any conversation. What's the last thing you remember before arriving at the barrier? He thought hard. Driving, just driving. It was dark. I was listening to the radio and then I was at the barrier handing you my paperwork. What were you listening to? Sports talk. Game recap from earlier. What game? Can't remember. Just voices talking about basketball, I think. Soren turned on the radio in the office, found a sports station. We listened for a few minutes. They were recapping the same game Pellier was talking about. The broadcast had started at 2:00 a.m. and was currently in the middle section. We'd been listening for about 5 minutes when Pellier suddenly stood up. Wait, that's the part I was listening to right before I got to the crossing. This part right here, right now. Yeah, I remember that specific conversation. The announcer talking about the three-point shot. Soren and I looked at each other. If Pelletier was listening to this broadcast when he arrived at the crossing the first time at 3:02, and he was listening to the same broadcast now at 3:55, then somehow he'd experienced the same 40-minute time period twice, once driving to the crossing, once sitting in our office. Or he'd never experienced it at all. Or he'd gotten caught in some kind of loop replaying the same arrival over and over. We need to check the truck, I said. Need to see if there's anything that explains this. We went back out to the impound area. The white Freightliner was still there, still sealed. But as we approached, I noticed something. The cab was different, not much, just small details. The baseball cap on the dash was positioned differently. The coffee cup in the holder was a different brand. I opened the cab, climbed in, checked the GPS unit. According to it, Pellier had never stopped. His route showed a continuous line from Duth to Armstrong. No pause, no deviation. Current location, Armstrong border crossing. Time 3:06 a.m., but it was almost 4 in the morning. I checked the truck's computer, the one that logs engine data, driving hours, rest stops. According to it, Pellier had driven for exactly 4 hours and 19 minutes. He'd left Duth at 10:47 p.m. He'd arrived at Armstrong at 3:06 a.m. and he'd never stopped. The engine had never shut off. The truck had never been in park, but I'd stopped him. I'd pulled him into secondary. The engine had been in park for at least 15 minutes while I questioned him. None of that was in the log. Sorin looked at the data. This doesn't make sense. I know you're sure you processed him earlier. You're certain it was the same truck. I'm certain. Then where's the record? Where's the log entry? I'd been so focused on the second arrival that I'd forgotten to check. We went back to the booth. I pulled up the crossing log on the computer. Entries were listed chronologically. I scrolled to 3:02 a.m. Nothing. No entry. The log jumped from a truck I'd processed at 240 to Pellier's current entry at 3:47. The first crossing didn't exist. Not in the system, not in the records. I checked the paper log, the one I kept as backup. Same thing, no entry at 302. My handwriting clearly showed the 240 truck. Then nothing until 3:47 when I'd started processing Pellier the second time. But I remembered it. Remembered the conversation. Remembered checking the trailer. Remembered putting on the new seal. Maybe you dreamed it, Sorin suggested. Maybe you dozed off for a minute. Had a vivid dream about processing a truck. And when you woke up, there it was. I wasn't asleep. I was reading reports. You sure? I wasn't sure. The more I thought about it, the less certain I became. Had I fallen asleep? Had I imagined the first crossing? Was I so tired that my mind had created a false memory? But then I looked at the trailer seal. The number didn't match the manifest, which meant either I'd put on a different seal earlier, or someone else had, or the seal had been changed during those 43 minutes that didn't exist. We let Pellier go, told him to get his GPS and phone checked, make sure they were keeping accurate time, told him to report to the delivery point that his truck had been delayed for inspection. He left confused, but cooperative, heading north toward Thunder Bay. I stayed in the booth for the rest of my shift, keeping detailed notes on every vehicle that crossed. Logging times, descriptions, conversations, making sure I didn't lose any more entries to whatever had happened. Nothing unusual occurred. The rest of the night was normal. Trucks came through, I processed them, they left. Every entry logged correctly, every time stamp accounted for. At 6:00 in the morning, day shift arrived. I handed over, went home, tried to sleep, kept thinking about those missing 43 minutes. Kept wondering where they'd gone, what had happened during that time. 3 days later, I got a call from the Thunder Bay delivery point. The furniture components Pellier had been carrying never arrived. The warehouse was calling, asking where their shipment was. Pellier's company said he'd made the delivery as scheduled, had the signed paperwork to prove it. But the warehouse said they never received the goods, never saw the truck, never signed anything. I checked our records. Pellier had crossed at 3:47 a.m. Estimated arrival in Thunder Bay 6:30 a.m. according to his stated schedule. The warehouse opened at 7:00 a.m. If he'd arrived at 6:30, he would have been waiting for them. He should have been there, but he wasn't. Furniture never showed up. And when Pellier's company tried to call him, tried to figure out where he was, his phone went to voicemail. His GPS showed his last location as Armstrong border crossing. He never left, or if he did, the system didn't record it. They sent police to look for him, checked the highways, the rest stops, anywhere he might have pulled over, found nothing. No truck, no driver, no cargo. It was like he'd crossed the border and vanished. The company filed an insurance claim. The investigation concluded that Pellier had likely stolen the cargo, falsified the delivery documents, and disappeared. They flagged him in the system, issued a warrant for his arrest. But I knew that wasn't what happened. I knew he'd crossed. I knew he'd driven north. I knew he was just trying to do his job, deliver his cargo, make his schedule. And I knew something had happened during those 43 minutes. Something that removed him from the records. Something that made it as though he'd never crossed at all. I requested the security footage from that night. Wanted to see the first crossing. Wanted to prove I hadn't imagined it. The footage came back the next week. I watched it carefully, watched myself in the booth at 3:00 a.m., watched the empty road, watched the time stamp tick forward. 301, 302, 303. No truck, no headlights, no freightliner pulling up to the barrier. The footage jumped. 1 second it was 303. The next it was 347. The entire 43-minute period was missing, just gone like someone had edited it out, but no one had. The file showed no signs of tampering. The metadata was clean. The footage was continuous except for that gap. I watched the 347 section, watched the white freightliner pull up, watched myself step out, approach the cab, start the conversation. Everything exactly as I remembered from the second crossing. The first crossing didn't exist. Not in the logs, not in the footage, not anywhere except in my memory and in Pelleter's confused recollection of arriving at a crossing he didn't remember entering. I think about it a lot. Think about those missing minutes. Think about where they went. Think about Pella driving north, disappearing somewhere on Highway 61. His phone and GPS frozen at 306. His truck computer showing he never stopped, never arrived, never existed beyond that moment at the crossing. And I think about time, how we measure it, how we track it, how we assume it flows in one direction at one speed for everyone equally. But what if it doesn't? What if there are places, moments where time behaves differently, where it loops or skips or doubles back on itself? What if the border isn't just a line on a map? What if it's a line in time? I still work at Armstrong. Still process trucks at 3:00 in the morning. Still log their arrivals, check their cargo, wave them through, but I pay closer attention now. I watch my timestamps. I compare my clock to the driver's clocks. I look for discrepancies, and I found them not often, maybe once every few weeks. A driver whose phone is running a few minutes slow. A GPS that shows an arrival time that doesn't match the booth clock. Small differences. Nothing as dramatic as 43 minutes. But enough to make me wonder. Enough to make me think those missing minutes are still out there, still happening, still catching people in their loop, removing them from time, making them disappear from the records. I haven't seen Pellier again, haven't seen his truck. But sometimes late at night when traffic is light and the crossing is quiet, I see headlights approaching from the American side. White freightliner, same truck, same driver, and I wonder if it's him. If he's still trying to cross, still trying to make his delivery, still caught in that loop, arriving over and over, never quite getting through, I wonder if one night I'll process him again. I'll check his paperwork, examine his cargo, wave him through, and 43 minutes later he'll arrive again and again and again. I wonder if time will catch me too. If one night I'll process a truck, log the entry, and then look at the clock and realize hours have passed or no time has passed, or I've been processing the same truck forever caught in my own loop, unable to move forward. I keep detailed records now. I write down everything. I photograph every truck, every driver, every time stamp. I save it all to multiple locations, because if I disappear, if I get caught in whatever took Pelletier, I want there to be evidence. I want someone to know it wasn't my imagination, wasn't a dream, wasn't exhaustion playing tricks. It was real. The missing time was real. The loop was real. And it's still out there, still waiting at the border, still taking people who cross at the wrong moment, in the wrong way, at the wrong point in time's fragile continuity. Still removing them from the records, from memory, from existence, 43 minutes at a time. The Pigeon River crossing sits right on the edge of Lake Superior, where the water's so cold it doesn't freeze proper until January. And even then, it's unreliable. I've worked here for 7 years, and I still can't get used to the sound the ice makes when it shifts. Like bones breaking, like the earth settling after something's disturbed it. My name is Elias Rohr, and I process vehicles coming into Canada from Minnesota. It's quieter than the big crossings down by Detroit or Buffalo, which suits me fine. Most of what we get is locals making runs to Thunder Bay, fishermen heading to their cabins, the occasional tourist who took a wrong turn and ended up at the border by mistake. During summer, we are busy enough. During winter, some nights I go 4 or 5 hours without seeing a single vehicle. It was early March, that miserable time of year when winter's dying but won't quite let go. The ice on the lake was rotten, breaking up in huge sheets that ground against each other whenever the wind picked up. We'd had 3 days of freezing rain, and everything was covered in a thick glaze that caught the light from the booth and threw it back in strange patterns. I was working alone that night. Budget cuts meant they'd reduced our overnight staffing, so unless there was a specific threat or a busy weekend, it was just me from midnight to 8. I had a radio, a panic button, and a phone that connected directly to the RCMP detachment in Thunder Bay. Most nights, I didn't need any of them. Around 4 in the morning, I was sitting in the booth reading a paperback thriller, something about a detective in Norway, when I saw headlights coming from the American side. A single vehicle moving at normal speed. I marked my page, put the book down, and stepped outside. The cold was brutal. Not just temperature, though it was sitting at around -25, but the dampness coming off the lake. The kind of cold that finds every gap in your clothes and settles there. My breath hung in the air, and I could feel the moisture freezing in my eyelashes. The vehicle was an old sedan Buick LeSabre, maybe 15 years old, with rust eating through the wheel wells and a crack across the windshield. It pulled up to the barrier and stopped, engine ticking, headlights cutting through the mist that was rising off the lake. I walked over, tapped on the driver's window. It came down immediately, no hesitation, and I got my first look at the driver. He was old, 80 at least, maybe older, with that kind of aged face where the bones show sharp under skin like parchment, white hair, thinning on top, watery blue eyes. He was wearing a thick coat, wool or something similar. And his hands on the steering wheel were liver-spotted and shaking slightly. Could have been the cold, could have been age. "Evening," I said. "How are you tonight?" "Cold," he said. His voice was thin, ready, American accent, upper Midwest. "Very cold, I hear you. Can I see some identification, please?" He reached for the passenger seat, and that's when I noticed the water. The whole passenger side of the car was soaked. The seat, the floor, the dashboard. Water was actually dripping from the glove box, running down onto the floor mat in a steady stream. "You got a leak somewhere?" I asked, pointing. The old man looked over at the wet interior like he was seeing it for the first time. "The lake," he said. "I was on the lake in this weather. That's not safe, sir. The ice is breaking up." "I know." He found his wallet, pulled out what looked like a passport, and handed it to me. The moment I touched it, I knew something was wrong. It was frozen solid, not cold, frozen. Ice had formed over the cover, and when I tried to open it, the pages were stuck together with what looked like frozen lake water. Little crystals of ice covered every surface, and there were droplets frozen solid between the pages like someone had dunked the whole thing in Superior and then left it out in the cold. "Sir, this passport is frozen. I can't read it like this." "It's me," he said. "I'm Mr. Halvorsen. That's my name in there." I looked at the old man, then at the passport in my hands. "When did this get wet?" "On the lake. I told you went out on the ice." "I went fishing through the ice, but the ice broke." He said it matter-of-factly like he was describing a trip to the grocery store. "Went right through." I felt a prickle of unease. "Sir, if you fell through the ice, you need medical attention. You could have hypothermia." "When did this happen? Yesterday or the day before?" "I don't remember exactly." I looked at his clothes. They were dry, his hair was dry. If he'd fallen through lake ice in -20 weather, he should be dead, or at the very least showing severe signs of exposure. But aside from the normal trembling you'd expect from someone his age in this cold, he looked fine. "Sir, I'm going to need you to pull over to secondary. We need to get you looked at by a paramedic. I just want to go home. My wife is waiting for me." "I understand, but if you fell through the ice, that's a serious medical situation. Let me get this passport thought out and we'll figure out what's going on." I walked back to the booth with the frozen passport, looking at it under the overhead light. It was definitely genuine, not a fake. I could make out parts of the text through the ice. A photo ID page partially visible through the frost. I ran it under warm water in the small sink we had, trying to thaw it enough to read. As the ice melted, water ran off the passport in steady streams. More water than should have been in there, way more. It was like the thing had been submerged for hours. And the water itself was strange. Too clear, too clean. Lake water is murky, especially Superior. This looked almost distilled. Finally, I got the cover open, pulled apart the first few pages. The photo page was waterlogged but legible. The picture showed the same old man, maybe a few years younger. The name read Harold Halvorsen. Date of birth, March 17, 1931. That would make him 94. I entered the name into our system, waited for it to run. While the computer thought about it, I looked out the window at the old man's car. He was just sitting there, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. Steam was rising from the passenger side where all that water was, fogging up the inside of the windows. The computer beeped. I looked at the screen. Name Harvison Harold James Dobby 3/17/1931, citizenship United States, status deceased. Date of death 308,204. That was 6 days ago. I stared at the screen, read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't misreading. Then I checked the date on my watch. March 14th, 2024. The system was saying Harold Harvison had died less than a week ago. I grabbed the phone, called the RCMP detachment. The night dispatcher answered on the second ring. This is Roar at Pigeon River. I've got a situation here. What kind of situation? I've got an elderly male at the crossing presenting a passport for a Harold Harvison. Systems are showing him as deceased 6 days ago. There was a pause on the other end. Could be an error in the system. Could be identity theft. Could be. But the photo matches and the guy's passport was frozen solid. He's saying he fell through the lake ice yesterday or the day before. Is he coherent? Seems to be a little confused about time frames, but he's talking normally. Keep him there. I'm sending a unit. ETA 40 minutes. Copy that. I hung up and walked back out to the car. The old man hadn't moved, still just sitting there, hands on the wheel, looking forward. I tapped on the window again. Mr. Harvison, I'm going to need you to wait here for a bit. There's some confusion with your documentation. He turned to look at me for the first time since I'd started talking to him. His eyes were roomy, unfocused, and there was something in his expression I couldn't quite place. Not fear, not confusion, something else. Is my wife here? He asked. No, sir, you're alone, but I've got some officers coming to help sort this out. She was supposed to meet me here at the border. Who was, sir? Your wife, Margaret. She said she'd be here when I crossed over. I looked in the back seat, empty. Looked at the passenger seat with all its water. There's no one else in the car, Mr. Harvison. I know, she's meeting me here on the Canadian side. A cold feeling settled in my stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature. So when was the last time you saw Margaret? This morning? No, yesterday. She was at the cabin. We were going fishing on the lake. That's where the fish are. He smiled, and it was a terrible smile, all teeth and no warmth. She loves ice fishing. Used to go with her father when she was a girl. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just told him to sit tight and wait for the RCMP. He nodded and went back to staring forward, hands still on that wheel. I retreated to the booth, turned up the heat, and tried to shake the chill that had settled into me. The passport was still on my desk, pages spread out to dry. I looked at it more closely now, examining the waterlogged pages. The visa stamps were all there, all normal. Entry stamps from Canada, a few from Mexico, one from Ireland. The most recent was from last summer, coming back into the States through the Detroit crossing, but between the pages caught in the binding, I found something else. A photograph wallet-sized stuck to the inside back cover. I peeled it off carefully, trying not to damage it. It showed a younger Harold Harvison, maybe in his 50s, standing next to a woman about the same age. She was smiling, wearing a thick sweater, holding up a fish. They were standing on ice, lake ice, with a small ice fishing shelter visible in the background. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, Margaret and me, Lake Superior, 1985. I turned the photo over, looked at the woman's face. She looked happy. They both did, young and happy and alive. I picked up the phone and called the dispatcher back. It's Roar again. Can you run another name for me? Margaret Harvison, wife of Harold, spelling. I spelled it out, waited while she typed. A long pause, then Elias. I'm showing Margaret Harvison, deceased as of March 8, 2024. Same date as Harold, same date. Yeah, looks like they both died the same day. I'm pulling up the incident report now. Another pause, keyboard clicking. Okay, this is from the Cook County Sheriff in Minnesota. They found a vehicle on the ice, Lake Superior, just off the North Shore. Ice had broken. Vehicle went through. They recovered 2 bodies from inside. Harold and Margaret Harvison both drowned. Vehicle had been in the water approximately 12 to 18 hours before discovery. My hands went numb. What date was the vehicle found? March 9th. So they went through the ice on the 8th. Bodies recovered on the 9th. I looked out the window at the old Buick sitting at my barrier, at the old man behind the wheel, at all that water on the passenger seat. Elias, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. The unit is about 30 minutes out. Can you maintain the scene? I can try. I hung up and just stood there for a moment trying to process what I just heard. The man at my barrier, the man who'd handed me a frozen passport, had been dead for 6 days. He and his wife had drowned in Lake Superior after their vehicle broke through the ice. And now he was here at the border, waiting to cross into Canada, saying his wife was supposed to meet him here. I looked at the photo again, at Margaret's smile at the frozen lake behind them. I put the photo down and stepped outside. The cold hit me even harder this time, or maybe I was just feeling it more. I walked slowly toward the car, watching the old man through the windshield. He hadn't moved, still staring forward, still waiting. I came around to the driver's side, tapped on the window. It came down. "Mr. Harverson, I need to ask you something." "All right. Where exactly were you fishing when you went through the ice?" "The usual spot about 2 miles out from the cabin." "There's a good drop-off there. Margaret knows where it is. And when you went through, what happened?" He thought about it for a long moment, like he was trying to remember. "It was cold. The water colder than anything. The car went down fast. I tried to get Margaret out, but the doors wouldn't open. Water pressure. I couldn't get her out. But you got out. I must have. I'm here. How did you get out, Harold?" He looked at me, and for the first time I saw something in those watery eyes. Something like awareness, like he was starting to understand that something wasn't right. "I don't remember," he said quietly. "I just remember being cold. And then I was driving coming here to meet Margaret." "Margaret's not coming, Harold. She said she would be here at the border on the Canadian side." I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to tell a dead man that his dead wife wasn't waiting for him on the other side of a border barrier. So I just stood there in the freezing cold, watching him, waiting for the RCMP to arrive and figure out what to do with whatever this was. That's when I noticed the smell, faint but distinct lake water, old and cold and deep. It was coming from the car, stronger now than before, and the water on the passenger seat was spreading, running onto the floor. More water than could possibly have come from a wet coat or boots. "Harold, did Margaret go through the ice with you?" "Yes, I couldn't get her out." I tried. "Is she still in the lake?" He looked at the passenger seat at all that water. "No," he said, "she's right there." I followed his gaze. The passenger seat was empty, just soaked upholstery and water dripping steadily onto the floor mat. There was no one there. There had never been anyone there. But as I stood there looking, I saw something that made my blood freeze. In the water pooling on the floor, catching the light from my flashlight, was a reflection. Not the ceiling of the car, not the window. Something else, a face looking up from the water, a woman's face, Margaret's face from the photograph, but wrong, blue-lipped and bloated. Eyes that should have been closed but weren't. I stepped back from the car so fast I nearly fell. When I looked again, the reflection was gone. Just water, just an empty seat. "She's waiting for me," Harold said on the other side. "She said she'd meet me there." I couldn't speak, couldn't form words, just stood there breathing hard, watching that empty seat, watching water drift steadily from places water shouldn't be dripping from. Harold put the car in drive. The engine, which I'd forgotten was still running, revved slightly. "I need to go to her," he said. "Will you open the barrier?" "I can't do that." "Harold, please, she's waiting. The RCMP are coming. They'll help you. They'll figure this out." "There's nothing to figure out." He said it patiently, like explaining something to a child. "I need to cross. Margaret's on the other side. She's been waiting 6 days. He put his foot on the gas. The car rolled forward slightly, bumped against the barrier arm. Harold stopped the vehicle. He bumped it again harder. The barrier shook but held. "I need to cross. I need to get to Margaret." "Harold, please." He hit the gas hard. The barrier arm splintered and broke, the car surging through and onto Canadian soil. I jumped back, reaching for my radio, but before I could call it in, the car stopped. Just stopped maybe 20 ft past where the barrier had been. The engine cut out. The headlights went dark, and in the sudden silence I could hear something, a sound like water draining, like liquid running out of a container. It was coming from the car. I approached slowly, flashlight up. The driver's side door was open now, hanging loose. The seat was empty. Harold was gone, but the passenger seat wasn't empty anymore. There was someone there now. A woman in a thick sweater, wet hair plastered to her face, water running from her clothes onto the seat, onto the floor, pooling at her feet. Her eyes were open, staring straight ahead at nothing. Her lips were blue. Her skin had the particular pore of someone who'd been in cold water too long. She looked exactly like the photo, exactly like Margaret Harverson from 1985, except older, 90-some years old and dead. I backed away from the car, breathing hard, hands shaking on my flashlight. The beam caught something else. Something in the water pooling on the ground beneath the driver's side door. Footprints. Wet footprints leading away from the car, heading north towards the lake. I followed them with my light. They led across the road into the brush, toward the sound of water lapping against ice, toward Lake Superior, dark and endless in the pre-dawn. The footprints went to the water's edge and stopped, and standing there, barely visible in the darkness, was a figure. An old man in a thick coat, standing at the edge of the lake, staring out at the black water. "Harold," I called out. "Don't." He didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge me, just stood there for a long moment looking at the lake. Then he took a step forward into the water, into the dark. He didn't sink, didn't fall through. He walked on the surface, feet finding purchase on water that should have swallowed him. Walked out onto the lake like it was solid ground, heading toward the horizon where Superior meets sky. I stood there watching until he disappeared into the darkness. Stood there listening to the ice crack and shift. Stood there until the RCMP arrived 20 minutes later and found me sitting on the ground outside my booth, shaking, unable to explain what I'd just seen. They found the car where it had stopped. Found Margaret Harvison in the passenger seat exactly as I described her. Found the broken barrier, the wet footprints leading to the lake, the frozen passport still sitting on my desk. What they didn't find was Harold. They searched the shoreline. The ice sent divers down when the sun came up. Nothing. No body, no evidence he'd gone into the water. The footprints stopped at the edge and didn't continue, like he'd just evaporated. The incident report said Margaret's body had been reanimated by the cold lake water, preserved by the temperature, driven to the border by some unknown party who then fled the scene. It said Harold Harvison's body was still missing, lost somewhere in Lake Superior. It said the wet footprints were mine, confused in my panic. But I know what I saw. I know who drove that car to my barrier. I know who walked out onto that lake. They transferred me after that to a crossing further south away from Superior. I don't work nights anymore. I requested days only, and they granted it after they read my statement, after they saw the look in my eyes when I talked about what happened. But sometimes late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about Harold and Margaret Harvison. I think about them going through the ice together, holding hands as their car filled with freezing water. I think about Harold somehow getting free, somehow making his way to a border crossing in a car that should have been at the bottom of the lake. I think about Margaret waiting for him on the Canadian side, just like she promised. I think about the look in his eyes when he told me she was waiting, the certainty, the need to cross over to where she was, and I wonder if he made it. If he walked across that lake and found her on the other side. If they're together now, wherever people go when they cross that final border. I still have the photograph, the one from the passport. Margaret and Harold on the ice in 1985, young and happy and alive, holding up a fish they caught together. I keep it in my desk drawer. Don't look at it often, but sometimes when it's cold outside and the wind's coming off the lake, I take it out and I swear I can smell it. Lake water, old and deep and cold. And I wonder if borders mean anything when you're already dead.